All right, everyone, as midterm season slowly crawls closer and closer, we got to start talking about the relative strengths and weaknesses of like the Republican and Democratic parties as they currently stand. Now remember, 2020 is off the table when it comes to predictions right now. Anyone telling you, well, I know Trump will win, or well, I know that Trump will lose, or hey, I know who the Democratic nominee will be. Unless they are making a very lucky guess, they're probably wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. They're just throwing shit at the fan and hoping that it doesn't come back out in their face, basically. Don't think about 2020 until after 2018. You got to wait another year before we have even the most basic understanding of what's going to happen in 2020. Even then, we got to wait till, we are halfway there after the midterms in order to really know, because then they start campaigning basically a year beforehand. I think, by the way, it's so excessive. At this point, it's, almost nonstop electioneering. You get a brief, 6-month reprieve, and then, people start gearing up for the next. But the Democrats have a problem right now. And very few people actually have talked about it. That's because they didn't even talk about this except during the State of the Union. And that's that at that time, the Republican National Committee has more than $40 million at the moment. That's, less their expenses. They'll be doing more fundraising. So we see where that number goes. But it's a considerable sum, and the third-party spending with the Cox alone is over $100 million. Trump is certainly capable of commanding an enormous amount of money into the system on his own. Like he basically says, hey kids, sell this skyscraper and form a super PAC. Nah, that's all you have to do. He can't coordinate with it directly, but hey, he could grab up 100 million, maybe 200-300 million really easy for campaigning. The Democratic Party had a few $100,000 and a bunch of debt. So they're broke. The Democratic Party is out of money. Going into the midterms, they've cast this midterms, by the way, and as one of the most important periods of electioneering in U.S. history, because they're still telling their fans, and they're wrong, but they tell them this, we're up against Hitler and a party of Nazis. That is essentially what it boils down to in their estimation. You're saying that you're going to go up against a charismatic, tyrannical madman with billions of dollars and a party that's willing to rip America to shreds, and you're doing it without any money. Here's the problem. When Hillary Clinton got stomped by Trump, in the Electoral College, disclaimer, it was her turn and she won the popular vote. Oh, it matters so much. The Electoral College be damned. We can just ignore the legal system and the election system completely because it didn't give us the result we wanted. So that works. Hillary Clinton outraised and outspent Trump many times over. Early on, it was like 10-1. Even later on, I think it was 6-1 or 5-1, some insane proportion. Trump had taken in a lot less money, spent a lot less money, basically just spent most of his time jumping around the country at his own expense on loans from his own business on a private jet giving rallies, which is, by the way, why he won, because he knew which areas to target and how much in order to bring the margin of victory up just enough to eke by and gain supremacy. And he did, and it was very funny to watch the meltdown on the left. Hillary Clinton raised almost $2 billion while also complaining that the DNC didn't support her enough, to the point where there's a lawsuit still being waged right now about straw man donations, the idea being that individuals wanted to donate more than the $2,000 individual cap to Clinton's campaign. You can donate more if it's to just a local, like a DNC office or something. So the idea is that Seth MacFarlane and these people were compelled to give much larger sums to the DNC locally, which then handed money to the Clinton campaign out of that total. It's a workaround for election law. So she raised even more under the table. She also had foreign money piling in. Don't try to tell me that a lot of that money wasn't from Saudi Arabia and China. Of course it was. A lot of it was probably Russian too. There's your real scandal. Hillary Clinton probably got tens of millions from Russian banksters, but nobody wants to talk about that. They're too concerned about Trump taking private investments as a private citizen, a decade ago. Big problem. Despite her massive fundraising apparatus, and despite the fact that she got $9 out of 10 from any bank or corporation, Trump's, lean, mean campaign machine was basically him signing himself checks from his own private accounts, plus some grassroots support from people who are donating, I think the average is what, 15, 20 bucks? It's basically like a Sanders-style grassroots campaign. despite the fact that she absolutely annihilated him in fundraising in every possible sense of the word. Hillary Clinton lost. Now imagine that the DNC, which has grown less popular over that subsequent, more than a year, and which doesn't even have any money on hand, while trying to prop up several dozen candidates, what do you think's going to happen to them this time? I think that they get washed away practically. I think the campaign map alone scares them. The fact that they no longer have time to even close to match the Republicans' donor base is also a problem. This has been a problem also on the local level. It's not just the Democratic National Committee as a whole. Vermont, the DNC came out and said they were basically broke a couple months ago. One of the last videos that I made in the Vermont Issues series some months ago was actually, hey, the Vermont DNC has come out and said, yeah, people just aren't donating this time around. They're just not giving us money. It's going to be problematic because the thing is, that's also a bellwether for how people turn out. That's a bellwether for turnout. If people are feeling energized, we must stop Trump, we must stop the evil Republicans, you'd think they'd be donating quite a bit of money, at least in small donations. They're not doing that. You've got a small fraction of the number of usual donations. Part of it, I will tell you what the reason for that is. Part of it is that the Democrats have maneuvered themselves to take the corporate and banker cash. People don't feel compelled. They looked at Hillary Clinton's insane total. They look at the Democratic Party, I think, on taxes, too, and they're like, why should we give them money? No, they should be just fine. Don't worry. And by the way, you've convinced them that Trump's fans are demoralized and have disappeared and that there's no way. Again, you've made the same mistake. You've convinced people it's impossible for him to win re-election or for the Republicans to maintain dominance in the House and Senate, which means they probably will. Their turnout looks to be on par with standard, which, by the way, benefits them anyway. The Republicans, for some cycles now, have done better in midterms than generals, certainly than the Democrats. The Democrats suffer from an enthusiasm gap. That's what gave you the 2016 result as well. In a differential turnout specifically in competitive states where Trump would go around even to areas that were unfriendly and hold big rallies. Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, was too busy going to Goldman Sachs dinners. And she held half as many rallies of much smaller size, specifically went into echo chamber communities, not competitive communities, to actually deliver those messages. Trump, meanwhile, in the wake of the election, has still spent a lot of time campaigning, basically continuing to campaign in Florida. That's the big one, it seems. I would encourage him to spend a lot more time in the Rust Belt. I would encourage the Republicans to pull out all stops in competitive areas of those states. Keep with the blue-collar message, you win re-election for Trump. The Republicans continue to hold the House and Senate. But the Democrats can't even campaign without money. I mean, are they going to tell the candidates, we're sorry, we are so broke at the moment. Nobody's willing to donate. You're going it on your own. You have to hold your own fundraisers. Do you realize what the problem with is that? It's exactly the same as Clinton's problem. Having to raise your own money means taking time off the campaign trail. The Republican candidates will be awash in money. The RNC is going to take every penny of that money. They'll probably beg Trump for huge private donations too. They'll say, pump these races full. You see, he can still, by the way, donate to those races. He can't do anything for the candidates individually, but he can give the local offices a lot of money. He could match dollar for dollar. He could say, okay, I'll give you 40, 50 million bucks. I'll double your money. It's shit to him. He's got billions of dollars. And he wouldn't even be breaking any laws in doing so. They could form a super PAC. Say, hey, Trump, we're forming a super PAC. Pump it. He's like, okay, you get a super PAC. You get a super PAC. Everybody gets a super PAC. It'll be like an Oprah moment. Yeah, just handing out millions of dollars pell-mell. He's capable of doing that. Who do the Democrats have that's willing to? Apparently nobody. The problem is, without those grassroots donations, by the way, it's going to be very, very visible if some Democratic philanthropist comes, like George Soros comes in and says, okay, I'll give you $100 million to match what the Koch brothers are selling. The Republicans, they've already got that problem with that being traditionally where they got their money from. Trump didn't. Trump said, fuck the donor class, I'll just take grassroots and otherwise I'll fund it myself. And he still won. He showed that there's a way to use social media and nonstop rallying, real in-person interaction with the voting base to win an election, and a much bigger one. The Democrats, I think, at this point, if after another 4 or 5 months they're still close to broke, they will lose the midterm elections. Because it doesn't matter what the platform is, they're not going to be able to deliver it to enough people. It doesn't matter how unpopular the Republicans are, there's no way for them to increase their own popularity. Their own popularity as a party is only marginally higher than the Republicans, and the differential between generic Republican and generic Democrat that, by the way, that only matters on the national level, not in these statewide races anyway, for the most part, it's going to narrow. I think that Republicans may even gain more popularity. I think that the gap may go in the other direction by the midterm elections. Just a wild theory there. It's possible. It's not definite. It would still be, most people would say it's vastly unlikely, but it doesn't even matter. These are state-level races. A lot of them are being held in districts Trump won handily. So he can go to those districts. He'll avoid the ones where he was less popular. He'll go to the ones where he was popular, pull off a couple rallies for the candidate. They kiss his ring, owe him a favor. That's how politics works. Meanwhile, he can loosen up the purse strings. He's got infinite money. He can't lose. It's going to be very difficult for the Democrats, I think, to overcome that, plus the lack of a platform, the lack of a clear party leader with any charisma. Pelosi is basically the leader of their party. That's a problem. Lack of a platform, lack of a clear leader, lack of money, embroiled in multiple scandals, and despite the fact that the sitting president is, albeit unpopular, they're less popular than Trump. Trump's way more popular than the Democratic Party as a whole. He's also more popular than the GOP as a whole. Why do you think that they've been falling in line? There's a reason for that. They realize they're better off with Trump, even if the message gets continually hounded by a very partisan left, because they realize that's still just a minority of the population that was going to vote Democrat anyway. They don't have to change their minds. They have to change the minds of centrists that primarily they're centrist because they're worried about money. They're obviously not ideologically very partisan, or they wouldn't be centrists now, would they? They wouldn't be independent voters. They'd have an R or a D that they would identify with. For that kind of voter, you need money, and you need to avoid war and any major calamity. Trump can do that. Trump will be campaigning on money come 2018. Meanwhile, the Democrats won't have any money. Now, isn't that very funny? I wouldn't be surprised if one of the taglines, one of the slogans, he's like, the Democrats are so bad at managing money, they don't even have any money to spend on campaigning. Isn't that a laugh? And then he'll sit there and he'll be like, the impoverished party, the sick man of politics. That's about all. Peace out.